Welcome to an introduction to the Social Engineer Toolkit. My name's Dave Kennedy. I wrote the Social Engineer Toolkit and wanted to put together a series of tutorials to kind of walk you through how to utilize the Social Engineer Toolkit to its full capacity. This actual movie will be primarily based off of the how to customize and configure set for your own needs. So let's first start off with editing the actual configuration file, and that's located under the config slash set underscore config file. And what that file does is it really allows you to customize set in a manner that you wouldn't typically be able to do just from the actual defaults itself. But let's do a quick peek and look through here. The first option that we have is the Metasploit path, and it's pretty self-explanatory, but what that is just the path to the actual Metasploit framework. If you notice here that the path right now is set to /pentest/exploit/framework3. That's actually the default for I think everything from backtrack 1 to backtrack 4. So that's the default installation path for Metasploit. If you're using something different, you'd simply just change this to something like MSF. And that would allow you to utilize the Metasploit framework in a different directory. The second option, if you're familiar with the Ettercat functionality within set, traditionally in versions 0.4 and before that, the way that it utilized Ettercat was through custom Ettercat filters, and what it would do is poison the victim, or just one specific victim, only one at a time, and replace all the hrefs within the victim's website with your malicious website. So for example, if you were to utilize the web attack, which we'll definitely be going into in later chapter or later videos, and you clone, say, Google, as soon as they went to Google, it would actually ARP cache poison them, inject all the hrefs into there, so when they went to go perform a search or click on any of the links there, it would then redirect you back to the attacker machine. I've actually went through in version 0.5 and completely changed that to where it no longer does the single victim and it does DNS poisoning instead. So what it'll allow you to do is poison everybody on your local subnet, and then allow you to either do one specific website. So for example, you can DNS poison for google.com, and so when victims go to google.com, they're actually going to your malicious website that you've cloned that looks exactly like google.com. Or you can do a star, which will basically allow you to clone every single or DNS poison every single website out there. So all you'd have to do if you wanted to turn this on is do ettercap equals on. Pretty self-explanatory. The next option is the Ettercap interface, and what this is the default interface that you're going to be using to actually perform the poisoning. This is the one that you would want to use on your network interface that's connected to the local subnet that you want to poison. So pretty self-explanatory. You can use ETH0, WLAN0, whatever your interface is that you're on the network with. Next is the Ettercat Path. That's just where the Ettercap executable is at. Users share Ettercap as default again in backtrack 4. Now the SendMail functionality is a little interesting. If you're familiar with SendMail, it's an all-in-one mail server basically, and the way that it's utilized within the Social Engineer Toolkit is that it will utilize SendMail, start it, and be able to spoof source addresses when you're actually performing an email attack. If you're using Backtrack 4, it's already installed by default. If you're not, then definitely go ahead and install it and turn that flag on if you want to use it. But one caveat to look at is most companies definitely do reverse lookups and are pretty hard to spoof the source addresses in some aspects. I've seen that SendMail attack successful roughly on a 40% basis. So what you'd want to do is enable that, turn it on, and do some testing before you actually did it on a real pen test or whatever you're doing it on. The next option is the web attack email, and what that is there's an attack vector within the Social Engineer Toolkit called the web attack, and what it'll do is it'll allow you to either import a template that set currently has, and it'll create a website for you automatically, or it'll allow you to completely clone a website. So you can clone Google or Gmail or whatever you want to, and it'll make a website that looks and feels exactly like that specific website that you cloned. Then it would utilize a specific set of attack vectors. So right now the current attack vectors are the Java applet attack, the Metasploit client-side exploit attack, and new to version 0.5 is the credential harvester. So once it sets all those up and utilizes whatever attack vector you want to, and if you have this web attack email equals on, like so, what you could essentially do is once everything's set up, it would then prompt you for sending out an email. So you can either do a mass emailer or to an individual person or target. So when you're doing spear phishing attacks, it's definitely useful. It creates the site for you automatically. Everything's running in the background, and then it'll actually go through and send the emails for you. Next is the self-signed applet, and to kind of walk through the Java applet attack, what it is when someone visits your website and if they have Java installed, it'll use a Java applet which has some predefined code in it to actually execute your payload. So for example, if you're going to be utilizing Metasploit payloads, a interpreter shell, it's platform independent, so it'll work for OS X, Linux, or Windows. And what it does is it'll prompt up a warning saying, hey, do you want to run this applet from this user? And by the way, the publisher's Microsoft. Well, in this instance, if you turn the self-signed applet on, if you installed the two, or the one, either or, the JDKs, the OpenJDK-6-JDK and the Sun-Java 6-JDK, and you can see here that we give a little bit of explanation in the how to install it on the Debian, Backtrack 4, or Ubuntu users. But what it'll allow you to do is self-sign it to whatever you want to. So say you go and clone, Google, for example. Well, then you have the self-signed applet turned on. What it'll actually allow you to do is go through and self-sign that certificate with Google. So the publisher would appear as Google when they're visiting the website. From a social engineering perspective, it's definitely more believable to utilize a certificate that you're cloning a website from that someone might be more willing to trust. Moving on to the next topic is the auto detect equals on. And what this is going to do is it's going to contact out your network interface, whatever you use to contact the internet, and try to connect out to Google. When it does that, it'll actually pull that IP address of your interface and utilize that with the reverse payloads or the IP addresses that it might need in order to connect back to you automatically. If you don't want this option, for example, say you have two network interfaces and it's pulling the wrong one, or you're using an external interface and it's pulling the wrong one, you can turn this to off, and then you can specify your own IP address manually. This is probably one of the number one questions that we get on the Social Engineer Toolkit, is how am I able to configure set in a way that allows me to manually enter my IP address in, and this is how you would do it. You would just set this flag to off, and that would allow you to specify your own IP address for your payloads. The last option within set is the web port. When you're utilizing the web attack vector, the web port can be changed to anything you want to. It doesn't necessarily need to be used on 80. So for example, if you find that their firewall only allows 8080 out, or 8081, or 443, or 25, or 53, and you're not able to get out from an 80 perspective, you can change that port and have it run on whatever you want to. And that's pretty much it from the configuration standpoint. Again, it's just a way of customizing set to kind of help you customize it in a way that you might need on whatever task you're performing. But there's definitely more customizations coming in version 0.6. This one right here is the current for version 0.5. In the next tutorial, we'll actually be covering set itself and some of the options and flags and attacks that you can utilize within it.